US-backed coup plot involving assassination of Belarusian president. Other officials foiled by Minsk and Moscow. And once again, if you're wondering why I'm covering this, as you know, everything is related, everything's interconnected, and you're gonna see why as we go on in the video. Boy, the Belarusian president is a stud. Look at this guy. Several people, including 2 in Russia, have been arrested for allegedly plotting an armed insurrection against the Belarusian president. He claims that the US may have sanctioned the assassination attempt. Well, it wouldn't be a surprise if it were the US. We know how dirty they are. Earlier this week, several Belarusian opposition figures were arrested in their home country and in neighboring Russia. The 2 nations made it clear that those arrested are suspected of plotting an armed insurrection against President Alexander Lukashenko, whose long grip on power was challenged last year by mass protests. Members of the alleged conspiracy, who remained free, dismissed the accusation and said they were simply fantasizing about Lukashenko's downfall. Oh, these guys deserve some claps for that one. They were just fantasizing. No, they weren't. They weren't meaning to conspire in an insurrection. They were just fantasizing about it. Yeah, right. The existence of an alleged plot to kill Lukashenko other top Belarusian officials, and even their family members was revealed on Saturday. In Minsk, the national broadcaster ONT ran a story naming suspected conspirators and exposing their plans. The report offered as evidence several clips of what appears to be Zoom meetings between them. So they were on Zoom, fantasizing, quote unquote, Lukashenko's downfall. Very nice. In one political science and commentator, Alexander Feduta mentions the death of Egyptian President Anwar Sadat as an event that led to the succession rotation of national leadership. It was a coup. Sadat was assassinated during a military period in 1908 by Islamist members of the Egyptian army forces unhappy with the approach with Israel. In another discussion, lawyer Yuri Sinkovich, imagine telling somebody, let us now finish off Luka and decide who will rule Belarus later. Wow, these guys are bold. At the ballot box. In yet another segment, the pair discuss how to ensure the loyalty of officials after the coup, but threatening dissenters with prosecution. Both people were arrested in Moscow this week. The FSB, Russian Security Service, announced on Sunday the agency said it was tipped off by their counterparts in Belarusian KGB that Sinkovich and Feduta were going to Moscow to meet people they believed to be Belarusian generals ready to turn against Lukashenko. The plan discussed at the meeting, as described by the FSB, involved killing almost the entire leadership of Belarus, a military coup, and a power blackout of the entire country. Wow, these guys are very, very bold, man. It was suggested that the active phase would be launched by some armed groups, partisans, who are currently stationed at secret bases, the FSB reported. The action was reportedly scheduled for May 9th, when Belarus held a military parade dedicated to the victory over Nazi Germany in 1945. Hidden camera footage of what appeared to be the meeting in Moscow was aired by the ONT in its expose. In it, Zenkovic and Fedota detailed their suggestions on how to conduct a successful armed coup. They said Lukashenko needs to be disposed of, and at least 30 minutes in Minsk. Presumably, top officials need to be interned literally within the first hour. Lukashenko himself spoke to the media to explain how his various opponents were plotting against him and his two sons. The group that includes Zenkovic and Fedota was definitely the work of foreign intelligence, he claimed. Most likely the CIA or FBI, of course, our favorite intelligence agencies. Lukashenko claimed that Zenkovic was an American agent. The lawyer was dual U.S. Belarusian citizenship and has been living in America for well over a decade. The president confirmed that the arrest earlier this week of Gregory Kortesiov, the leader of the opposition political party BNF, was part of the move against the same alleged conspiracy. Zenkovic was a prominent member of the same party and held elected office on a local council before immigrating to the U.S. Russian TV channel Russia 1 showed more of the hidden camera footage on Sunday. In it, Fedota suggested that a post-coup Belarus should be governed by a state council consisting of leaders of all registered political parties, while democracy was grown up from local self-governance. He and Zenkovic suggested they should curate the likes of the press, the courts, the parliament, the justice and education ministries, the Central Election Commission, and the development of a new constitution. Zenkovic implied a coup could be financially profitable for participants, saying Lukashenko must have a nest egg somewhere that can be simply taken quietly if the occasion arises. Now, these guys are bold and funny at the same time. The scale of the threat posed to the Belarusian government by the suspected plot is up for debate. The Zoom meetings shown in ONT story included a total of 7 people, including 3 arrested individuals. One of the 4 others is Pavel Kolashenko, who lives in New York. He said he and others were not part of a conspiracy, but rather an online discussion club. Oh, sure. It's not a conspiracy. It's an online discussion club. Yes. They spoke about the same things that are discussed every evening in every Belarusian family. How to speed up Lukashenko's return, he said. Well, these guys are funny. Another individual, Seattle-based Alexander Poropichko, said a coup was a prime way to get rid of a bloody dictatorship, and that it would have been unprofessional not to discuss various scenarios for the regime change in Belarus. He denied Belarus's claim that the alleged plotters went further than venting their dislike of Lukashenko's rule on Zoom. The ONT report claimed that the ringleaders have received foreign money for their operation against the Belarusian president. Last year, Lukashenko was re-elected as president of Belarus for a sixth consecutive term. Opposition forces claimed the vote was rigged and launched amid a months-long mass protest campaign demanding he step down. Nowhere have we seen someone be elected and it was claimed that it was rigged. The election of Donald Trump, for example. But I am no way a supporter of Trump, but it has its similarities. Lukashenko responded with a heavy-handed police crackdown and accusations against his detractors, who he claimed were trying to topple him with the backing of Western powers, as had occurred in Ukraine. So we see here that this was a failed coup attempt to remove the Belarusian president. And if you've watched my video on the IMF providing the $20 million to St. Vincent in relief, you would know that we went through this article here, where the IMF was bribing countries to do extreme lockdowns. And who was one of the main countries who spoke out about this bribing? It was Belarus. A recent case in Belarus has exposed the conditions laid by the agencies for loans being provided for COVID-19. The president of Belarus has exposed that the World Bank coronavirus aid comes with conditions for imposing extreme lockdowns measures to mold their coronavirus response and that of Italy, and even changed in the economic policies of which he refused as being unacceptable. The same guy, President Alexander Lukashenko. And now we see this was last year, August 2020, that he was being bribed by the IMF to lock down his country. And when he said, no, look at this timeline. This article was uploaded yesterday, April 11th. A US-backed coup trying to assassinate him. And if that sounds familiar to you, well, let's go to this article here. This is The Guardian. Tanzania's COVID-19 president John Magufuli dies aged 61. Leader's death follows two-week absence from public life that prompted rumors he had the virus. And as we know now, he died of a heart attack. But let's read this mainstream article for now. Tanzania's president, John Magufuli, one of Africa's most prominent COVID-19 deniers, has died after 2 weeks of absence from public life. That prompted speculation that he had contracted the disease. Magufuli's death was announced on Wednesday by the country's vice president, Samia Suluhu, who said the president died of heart failure. He was 61. The president, this is a quote, the president of the United Republic of Tanzania, the Honorable Dr. John Pombe Joseph Magufuli has died of a heart condition at hospital Mesnio in Dar es Salaam, where he was receiving treatment, she said on a statement broadcast for TBC. Magufuli, a divisive figure who won a second term in October in an election marred by violence and allegations of fraud. Remember, this is a mainstream article. Keep that in mind, so have your salt at hand to sprinkle. Had not been seen in public since the 27th of February, leading many to believe that he was sick and possibly incapacitated. He had a history of heart problems and wore a pacemaker. Government officials had insisted Magufuli was working normally and that citizens should ignore hateful rumors coming from abroad. Police arrested 4 people since last week on charges of spreading false information about the health of the political leaders. Last week, the country's opposition leader, Sunda Lissu, said that Magufuli was critically ill in the hospital after contracting COVID-19, while media in neighboring Kenya reported that a named African leader was being treated for COVID-19 on a ventilator in the hospital there. Okay. Let's see. Magufuli denied the local spread of COVID-19 in Tanzania, discouraged the mention of the disease by health workers, and claimed without evidence that vaccines were dangerous, suggesting instead that people pray and inhale herb-infused steam. Despite repeated requests by the World Health Organization, remember that key player, World Health Organization, Tanzania has not published any statistics on cases since May, when it registered 509 infections. It has no known testing program in place, and health officials have been forbidden from mentioning the virus. So you see, this is the same guy. He's he's a doctor. He has some kind of medical degree. I can't remember what, but he's a doctor. And he denied the existence of COVID-19 with good reason, because there is no evidence that it actually exists. It's not been isolated. So there's no evidence that it actually exists. And here he's being ridiculed because he's actually doing the science. Here it says, and he claimed without evidence that vaccines were dangerous. What? Without evidence? There is mountains and mountains and mountains of evidence that vaccines are dangerous. And yet this article is saying that there is no evidence that vaccines are dangerous. And they're ridiculing for saying that people should pray and inhale herb infused steam. If the virus doesn't exist, praying and inhaling herb infused steam is a good thing. Either way. And he's being ridiculed for this. Critics said that Magufuli's dismissal of the threat from COVID-19, as well as his refusal to lock down the country as others in the region had done, may have contributed to unknown deaths. Yeah, right. Evidence suggests Tanzania was hit hard by recent surge in infections across southern and parts of eastern Africa, brought on by the spread of new and more transmissible variants. Man, I can't even read this stuff. It's hard to read this garbage, man. It's hard to read this. No one lies about the man. A true hero who actually did the science. This was the same guy who tested. If you don't know the Tanzanian president, he was the same. The guy who tested the what it was, some kind of fruit, a goat, and some other thing, and it came back positive. And when he saw that, he said that we are not going to be using these tests because these tests are inaccurate and useless. He was right. And he was denying the existence of COVID because there's no evidence of COVID. And all of a sudden he dies. Look at this. Tanzania's new president changes policy on COVID-19. What does that sound like? What does that tell you? It was a coup. A soft one. A silent one, but it was still a coup. The guy wasn't following the bogus COVID-19 narrative and locking down his country and doing all this stuff and testing and vaccines and all that bullshit. He was against that and against the WHO, and they don't like that, so they took him out. Remember, he died of a heart attack. I remember, it's gonna be relevant at the end of this video. So here in this article it says, this is the AP. Tanzania's new president changes policy on COVID-19. So all of the policies that Magufuli had put in place, she reversed all of them and is now following the bogus COVID-19 narrative. Look at her. Sold her people, sold her soul in progress. Tanzania's new president appears to be taking a new scientific approach to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. Look at this. President Samia Suluhu Hassan, this was the vice president under Magufuli. So they took him out and promoted her. So she knows what's going on. She knows if she don't follow the narrative, she's gonna get taken out too. Said Tuesday she will form a technical committee to advise her about the scope of COVID-19 infections in the country and how to respond to the pandemic. COVID-19 is not something we should be quiet about or refuse flatly or accept without doing scientific examination. Hassan said in Swahili, "We will do medical research which will tell us the scope of the problem and advise us about what the world is recommending, as well as our own expertise." So they took out someone who actually did the research, a known doctor and scientist, and they put in someone who's just gonna follow whatever they want. Amazing. Hassan made the remarks that were broadcast live after swearing key government officials in a hall in State House, the president's official residence in that place, Tanzania's largest city. More than 100 top government officials were present, most of whom did not wear face masks or keep distance from each other. See? Even the other government officials know that this is all bogus. Assange's comments are a drastic switch from the policy of her predecessor, the late President John Magufuli, who was one of Africa's leading COVID deniers. See, they keep using that word. He claimed that in June last year, Tanzania had rid itself of COVID-19 through 3 days of national prayer. He dismissed the scientific approach to prevent the treatment of the disease. He discouraged the use of face masks and instead promoted prayer, physical fitness, and herbal remedies. What's better than prayer, physical fitness, and herbal remedies to combat all diseases? But nope, face masks, lockdowns, and vaccines, and all that stuff. Magufuli's government fired officials who gave their opinion, and some people were arrested. Opposition leader Sundu Lissu is in exile in Belgium, cautioned Tanzanians not applaud Hassan's announcement just yet. This will be no different from Magufuli's way of doing. This is Magufuliism without Magufuli. Wow, I mean, so he was a chemist. The dude was a chemist. The dude was an actual scientist. He knew what he was talking about. He tested the PCR test against a fruit, a goat, and some other thing that all came back positive. And he knew from then that these tests were bogus. And he didn't use them in his country. He didn't lock down, didn't use masks. He wasn't into none of that stuff. So they had to get him out. I know they got in that shill woman. Here's another one. Most people didn't even know about this one. Burundian president dies suddenly after expelling WHO for false pandemic. Another African president, another G they took out. Burundi, Africa, President Pierre I can't pronounce that name. Just call him Pierre. Burundi's president, 55, died following a cardiac arrest despite being known for his good health. Some have speculated that his death is linked to the fact that less than a month ago, this was June 23rd, 2020, so this was last year. So, less than a month before he died, the Burundian government expelled experts from the WHO responsible for advising on the false COVID-19 pandemic. Burundi had only one COVID-19 death. Pierre's unexpected death is reminiscent of the mysterious plane crash that killed Polish President Lech Kaczynski in 2009, shortly after he refused the vaccine from the WHO against H1N1 flu. See what happens? They do this all the time. Anyone who goes against the narrative gets killed. Here we can see the president of Poland was killed in 2009 in a plane crash right after he refused the vaccine from the WHO. And now, just like the Tanzanian president, well, he died. This guy died before the Tanzanian president, so they're sending a message to others like, if you don't go with the narrative, gonna get assassinated. President of Burundi, Pierre Nkurunziza, oh, that's a mouthful, 55, has died following a cardiac arrest. See? We got cardiac arrest, we got heart attack. The sudden death comes as a surprise, as he had been evaluated recently as being in good overall health. But controversy has emerged in the African country as local pundits have suggested that his death could have been the consequence of poisoning. Very spot on. Less than a month ago, the Burundian government ordered the expulsion of the experts from the World Health Organization responsible for advising on the false pandemic COVID-19. The president and his Ministry of Foreign Affairs had declared the WHO representatives would henceforth be persona non grata, that is, not welcome on Burundian territory. Yeah, he wasn't about that bullshit. They took him out. Burundian President Pierre Nkurunziza dies suddenly after reports he was being treated. See, they always try to flip it. Just like the Tanzanian president. He died, we know that he died of a heart attack. But then in the mainstream articles, they come out and they try to say that he died of COVID-19. Because he was a COVID-19 denier, they want to say that he died of COVID-19. They always try to manipulate us. Burundi's long-ruling president Pierre Nkurunziza has suddenly died of what his government said was cardiac arrest, just days after media reported that he and his wife were being treated with COVID-19. The same thing that happened with the Tanzanian president. Mr. Nkurunziza, 55, had shown no signs of illness until he was admitted to the hospital in town of Kuruzi on Saturday. After appearing to recover on Sunday, his health worsened to very great surprise on Monday, and he could not be revived despite several hours of effort. A government statement said Mr. Pierre had been due to step down from the presidency within weeks after an election last month in which his chosen successor was named the winner. The ruling party bestowed him the title Eternal Supreme Guide of Patriotism. If the link to COVID-19 is confirmed, which it was not, as we know now, he would have been the first world leader to have died of coronavirus. In the early weeks of the pandemic, government officials had insisted that Burundi was protected by God and would not suffer the virus. Burundi was one of the few countries worldwide that refused to ban sports events or take the other restrictive measures. It also allowed mass campaign rallies of tens of thousands of people during the election campaign last month. Face masks were rarely seen. Look at this man. A G. 4 experts from the WHO, the World Health Organization, who had reportedly questioned the government's response to the pandemic, were expelled from Burundi last month. The president's wife, Niece Bukumi Nkurunziza, was airlifted to Kenya on May 29th to be treated for COVID-19 at top hospital in Nairobi. According to the Kenyan media on Monday, and local media reported that Mr. Pierre was in hospital with COVID-19. None of the reports were confirmed by government. Mr. Pierre, an avid soccer player, sports fan, had attended a volleyball game as recently as Saturday, according to government statement. On Sunday, he was interacting with people around him until the sudden worsening of his condition. The statement said Burundi has reported only 83 cases of coronavirus and 1 death. But at last report, a total of only 382 tests have been conducted in the country of 11 million, one of the world's lowest rate of testing. This was unconfirmed reports of many deaths from the virus in Burundi. Mr. Pierre, a former rebel leader, won power in 2005 at the end of a 12-year civil war that ravaged Burundi and killed an estimated 300,000 people. He imposed authoritarian rule on the country, shutting down independent media outlets and arresting a number of journalists and opposition figures. Under a peace agreement after the Civil War, he was scheduled to step down in 2015, but instead he secured a disputed court ruling that allowed him to win a 3rd term. Just going on a long thing, but as we can see, this was the first guy, one of the first guys to refute the COVID-19 pandemic, and he kicked the WHO out of his country because he realized that all that was all nonsense. And then a month later, he died of a heart attack, of cardiac arrest. And then we have this year, the Tanzanian president was also against the COVID-19 pandemic and wasn't doing all the lockdown and mask and all that nonsense. And they killed him too. He died of a heart attack. And it's no surprise that after the Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko came out and exposed that the IMF and the World Bank were bribing countries to shut down their economies or lock down their countries, that there would be a coup attempt and assassination plot against him. It's all connected. It's all to make an example of people. It's a message. If you come out, if you're a world leader and you come out against the WHO, against the COVID-19 pandemic narrative, you're gonna get assassinated. And this should show us that it's not about health, it's about control. I think a lot of world leaders are scared. Some of them are scared to come out and refute this, and others are just being paid. But either way, it's gonna be the same result. The economy is gonna crash. Food prices and cost of living is gonna go up. Things are gonna get tough if people don't come out against this. It's gonna get real tough.
Have you brought with you some of those devices which would have enabled the CIA to use this poison for?
We have indeed.
For killing people? don't point it at me. I wonder if
You roll that over.
Now, does this pistol fire the dart?
Yes, it does, Mr. Chairman. The round thing at the top is obviously the sight. The rest of it is what is practically a normal 45, although it's special. However, it works by electricity. There's a battery in the handle, and it fires a small dart.
So that when it fires silently?
Almost silently, yes. Very little.
What range does it have?
100 meters. 100 meters, I believe, about 100 yards, 100 meters.
About 100 meters range.
Right.
And the dart itself, when it strikes the target, does the target know that he's been hit and about to die?
That depends, Mr. Chairman, on the particular dart used. There are different kinds of these flechettes that were used in various weapon systems, and a special one was developed which potentially would be able to enter the target without perception.